I have students who love music but aren't very interested in my computer science course. How can I get them excited about computer science? Do you have resources to help me?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So for context, when I switched over from music education and started teaching coding classes at the K-8 level, they were using one platform as code.org, and students after a while got pretty bored with this. So they had this technology special class that they rotated to, and so I'd see them for 3 weeks every single day for 3 weeks straight, and then I'd see them again next quarter. And so we were able to dive deep into things, and the students got bored with just doing the same thing over and over. And so very quickly, I was like, okay, how about we actually do more arts based and music based, like creation through code? And so the next semester, I added in Scratch. And so students were able to explore stories, games, animations, even music. There are some limitations, and I talk about that in one of the podcast episodes that is going to be in the show notes. But the students kept coming to me and saying, yeah, this is great, but I'd really like to be able to make more music, like dive deeper into this. Cool. So the following semester, I added in Sonic Pi, which allows you to dive deeper using a programming language, Ruby, and allows you to like literally live perform by typing out lines of code, or you could compose stuff, or you can create all types of like aleatoric chance-based music making or soundscapes or whatever you want to do. And then the following semester, I added in Swift, which was like professional app development, because students were like, "Well, I want to be able to make stuff for my iPad or my whatever device." And so I kept adding a new thing each semester. So the reason why I'm saying this is because to answer your question more directly is whenever students came to me with a question of, "Hey, how do I explore this thing through CS?" I found a language or a platform that allowed them to do that, whether it was like Khan Academy, JavaScript, more art and animation, or Scratch, or Sonic Pi, or Swift, or core.org, whatever. There are many different options in there. So if you want to get kids interested in CS and they love music, find a way to explore that. Now, how do you do that? Well, there are platforms, and this will kind of answer another question, but some easy ones to compose or perform are Scratch, that's block based. You could use TunePad, which is Python, I believe. You could use EarSketch, which I think is both Python and JavaScript. You could use Sonic Pi, which is Ruby, and there's like many more that you could do. Now, this is not just composing, which is a really cool thing that you can do, but you can also perform or algorithmically improvise. So there's a subgenre of music making called algo rave, where it's combining rave culture with algorithms. And so somebody will literally go up onto a stage, they'll display their screen behind them, and all the screen shows is code. And it's just this blank screen, and you start typing in lines of code, and you hit run, and it executes, and then you hear oomps, oomps, oomps. And then, okay, cool. We got our like four on the floor going, and then we add in a melody, and then a bass line, and then you see all the lines of code as they're going, and they're literally performing music, and you can see everything that they're doing to actually create that music. The other side of things of algorithmically improvising, one of the things that I like to kind of experiment with was this like exploration of music and CS in ways that you cannot do without the connection of the two. And so one of them is looking at how you can have randomization in a program. So you use like a random seed or like a number generator or something to just randomly select within some kind of a frame. So I created an infinite drum set. So I gave it a single seed, any kind of number, and then it would just algorithmically improvise a beat with fills and grooves and all sorts of really cool stuff. And then you give it a different seed, and then it will allow you to infinitely create a new different set of different rhythms and whatnot. And I could actually change how good or bad the performer was. And so I made it so that like it would either be perfectly in time, or I could scale it back so it sounded like some of the elementary kids that I work with when they're first figuring out how to play on the drums. So those are some really cool things that you can do and explore if you kind of think outside of the box. But it doesn't have to just be music making. So some people are like the percussionists like myself are really just interested in like sound and might not necessarily need to focus on melodies, harmonies, rhythms, etc. So you could also explore like randomized soundscapes. So I made one like back when I was doing my residency in the School of Music. There was like a vocal professor in the office next door to me and just bang away on the piano with somebody be like singing. And so I wanted to be able to like drown that out. No offense to them. So I created a randomized soundscape that would like make it sound like I was walking through a forest. And so every time I would turn that on, it'd be a random walk. It'd be like, oh, there's a river on my right. There's birds flying overhead. There's crickets, etc. And so I created this without making any kind of music, but it was all through code that I was using to be able to create this soundscape. So those are some like many different ways that you can explore music and sound in CS for those who happen to be interested in it.
I really like how you phrase that and how you kind of drew that scope and sequence out and how that worked with your students because I agree completely. What I find with students, especially when they're getting to that high school level, is sometimes they've seen so much of the same that they're even our kids who really love computer science are bored of computer science.
Yep.
And I think that what you hit on there was a lot of that interest-based computer science, doing computer science work and learning a language for the purpose of meeting an interest that you have, specifically in this case with music. And I
Yep.
love that idea because it's okay if I have three different kids in a room learning three different languages or programs if that's going to lead them to what they want to get from their computer science education, particularly if it's interest based for their music. And I like that because I think I'm guilty of it myself. I pigeonhole myself into this group's going to learn this coding language with this
Mm-hmm.
program at this pace. But we know that that doesn't work for all our students. And even our students who love computer science get bored with the
Yeah.
same stuff. So that interest based and letting them come to you and say, this is what I want to do. How do I do that? I feel like that's such a good bridge for everything we do, computer science, music, all of those pieces. That interest is so huge. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. And so for context, like the K-8 coding classes were mandatory. So having taught classes that are mandatory and classes that are like people elect to take them or pay to attend, etc., it's very different when everybody is like required to be there and they're like, I don't want to learn this. Okay, so if I came in with this really awesome pre-scripted thing that I find really interesting, and the kids who want to be there find interesting, the kids who don't care are going to be like, so what? And then what? They're not going to learn anything. So if you start with the interest, then it draws them into the field. At least in my opinion. Sometimes I had some middle schoolers who were just like, well, I don't want to do this. And I was like, well, do you play video games? And like, yeah. Well, how about you modify a video game or make your own? Like that was the way to like kind of get them into it. And then it drew them into more things down the road. They were like, well, how do I do this thing? Oh, well, here's something for you. It's hard to facilitate, to be honest, because like if I walk up to a computer, like it might be JavaScript, the next computer's Scratch, the next computer's Ruby, and then like Swift, like it's very hard. You have to be able to debug very fast and it kind of set up a lot of practices to encourage peer collaboration, facilitation, and question asking, etc. But in the long run, it was totally worth all the efforts and all the languages that I ended up using or not using, but still learning and going, nah, we won't do that one.
Yeah, see, I think as you were saying that, it's such a good point that the younger kiddos where it's not an elective that they're choosing necessarily. In Wyoming, we know this is now part of our state requirements from K-12. And so our elementary and junior highs are going to start to see kids who are required to do this, just like you said, are like, I'm not interested at all. And I think you're right. Some of those peer editing skills and those peer helper skills that you can set up early on, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's so worth it in the long run for you to be able to reach their interests. I'm just going to say, having taught for quite a while, it's worth teaching to their interest, even though it's a little bit harder because really bad behaviors with kids who are bored is also really hard. So, kind of picking our level of difficult there, it's hard for me to maybe know and manage all of the different resources that they're using or languages that they're using. It's
Yeah.
also hard to deal with half a class of board students. So I like how you
Yeah.
say that, like this interest based driven. I mean, choose your hard, right?
This excerpt of the CSKA podcast is from episode number 169. It's called Computer Science and Music, CSTA Wyoming interview.